The Iowa Utilities Board is now in session. My name is Jerry Huser, and with me today are board members Nick Wagner and Dick Lozier. It is 9 o'clock a.m. on December 5th, 2018, and this is the continuation of the hearing in SPU-2018-0007. This docket involves the consolidation of a number of dockets related to Interstate Power and Light Company's Advanced Metering Infrastructure, or AMI, project. As a reminder, this hearing is being recorded by a certified court reporter. The hearing is governed by Iowa Code Chapter 17A and 476 and Chapters 7, 19, and 20 of the Iowa Administrative Rules of the Utilities Board. I will begin by confirming those that are in attendance and appearances, as well as requesting that you identify for me your witnesses that remain to be called and the order in which they will be called. Mr. Greiveldinger.
Michael Greiveldinger from Interstate Power and Light Company. With me is Mr. Eric Callisto from Michael Best and Friedrich. We have one witness remaining to be called. That's Angela Leiden Van Gundy.
And of your other witnesses, how many are in attendance if they need to be recalled?
Mr. Randy Bauer and Mr. Dave Vogensen are in attendance.
Thank you. The Office of Consumer Advocate and the Consumer Advocate, Mark Schuling.
Consumer Advocate Mark Schuling and Attorney Jeff Cook. We have no additional witnesses to present at this point in time.
Mr. Marcus.
Yes, we have 7 witnesses, and the projected order is Ms. Matera, Mr. Lipman, Mr. Goldman, Mr. Bathgate, Ms. Kelly, Mr. Sheckley, and Mr. Walton.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. As a reminder to all those parties in attendance, this record does contain confidential information, and the board requests that the parties remain cognizant of that fact, including Mr. Greiveldinger. I will remind you that you are responsible for ensuring that if there is any confidential material that is raised, that you point that out to the court and inform us whether or not we'll need to go into confidential session. Do you understand this?
I do.
Thank you. I'm coming back to you for a second. You're okay. Mr. Marcus, it's my understanding at this point in time you are representing both interveners, Ms. Matera and Mr. Lipman. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you understand that you will be allowed to redirect only on those witnesses that you call?
Correct.
All right. Do you have any questions in regards to that issue?
I don't think so at this time, Your Honor.
All right. If you do, please point out the same to me. So we will begin today with Interstate Power and Light calling their first witness.
Your Honor, we call Angela Leiden Van Gundy to the stand.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate?
I do.
You may be seated. You understand you're under oath.
Yes.
Mr. Greiveldinger, you may begin.
Thank you. Ms. Leiden Van Gundy, can you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Angela M. Leiden Van Gundy. Leiden-VanGundy.
And did you cause to be filed in this docket both direct and rebuttal testimony?
Yes.
And related exhibits?
Yes.
And if I were to ask you the same questions today, now that you're under oath, would your answers to those questions be the same?
Yes.
Were you here during the first 2 days of the hearing in this docket?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall that there were certain questions regarding a number of meter readers and the number of meters that a meter reader could read?
Yes,
And do you recall that those questions were deferred to a future witness?
correct.
Are you able to speak to those questions?
I am.
Could you tell me approximately how many meter readers IPL currently has?
Approximately 120 meter readers.
And after the full deployment of AMI and the provisioning of the related systems, how many meter readers do you anticipate IPL will have?
No meter readers remaining.
Currently,
Excuse me, I apologize. I need you to speak just a little bit louder so the live streaming picks up
Okay.
the conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
when currently with meter readers going out to read the meters, on average, how many meters can a
OCA would
meter?
like to make an objection. This appears to be direct testimony that we weren't aware of, and we're not quite understanding why IPL is allowed to ask additional direct questions of this witness.
Happy to respond. Oh,
Mr.
sorry.
Greiveldinger?
Yeah, this was, we were specifically asked by the board, questions on this, and we're asked if another witness could provide this information. We said Ms. Leiden Van Gundy could.
Well, what I would understand is that the other parties have the opportunity to ask her questions regarding these subjects if they want to, but I'm not understanding why IPL is able to add to their testimony with additional direct testimony.
Mr. Greiveldinger, I'm in agreement with Mr. Schuling. Do you have anything else for this witness at this time?
The other item we have is the witness for Ms. Matera, Ms. Kelly, had submitted some information that within the last week in comments, and we had some additional information based upon that, which Ms. Leiden Van Gundy, through an exhibit, I'd like to get in if possible.
So, Mr. Greiveldinger, if you wish to proceed in this manner, are you suggesting that you will not object if Mr. Marcus wishes to open up or respond to questions or answers that have been submitted into the docket?
This is new information that Mr. Marcus has as an exhibit in this case, which he's provided us this morning, that we're simply responding to, Your Honor.
So then Mr. Marcus can bring that up in his examination of this witness, and then at that point, if it is raised, you may ask your questions and redirect.
Understood.
Mr. Schuling, you're next. Mr. Cook?
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's my understanding you're the business and development lead on the AMI project. What duties and responsibilities does that include?
So from a business lead standpoint, I work with different business departments within IPL to determine business processes that will be impacted and changed as a result of the new technology. The deployment lead responsibilities are for the deployment and installation of the meters.
And how long have you been the deployment lead on the AMI project for?
Approximately 15 months.
Mr. Cook, is your green light on? Can you pull that mic closer, please?
Sorry, board chair. Is it fair to say that you oversee all customer communications on AMI?
The majority of them, yes.
Okay, and that includes the notices, letters, mailers, and sent to customers that were referenced in your testimony?
Correct.
Okay, let's turn to your work on the AMI project. Is the non-standard meter an alternative for eligible customers who do not want service measured by IPL's standard meter and AMI meter?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that question?
Is the non-standard meter an alternative for eligible customers who do not want service measured by the AMI meter?
Yes.
Okay. When did the AMI meter become IPL's standard meter?
That became our standard meter when we started the project.
Okay, and approximately when would that be?
That would have been just, we started deployment, I believe, in the fall, I don't remember which month exactly, 2017, just over a year ago.
Okay, so fair to say October 2017.
Correct.
There are approximately 375,000 analog electric meters in service prior to the deployment of the AMI meters. Is that correct?
I do not know the exact number. I do know the number that is remaining today.
Okay, I will have you turn to data request number 1, sent by the Office of Consumer Advocate.
Your Honor, I don't know if the witness has a copy of that data request with her.
I do not have that.
Would that data request been provided in a prior exhibit?
Yes.
Can you provide us with the exhibit number? For the information of all the parties, the Iowa Utilities Board has prepared an exhibit book that we have placed in front of the witness, and those are labeled as per our last hearing and should be accessible to the witness in that book.
Hey, Board Chair, I'm referencing OCA Hearing Exhibit 101. I'm looking at page 2, response A. So looking at response A, it's fair to say about 375,000 analog electric meters were in service prior to the deployment of AMI.
Correct.
Is it also fair to say there are approximately 95,000 non-AMI digital meters in service prior to the deployment of AMI?
Correct.
So IPL standard meter, the AMI meter, is a meter that was not used prior to AMI deployment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
On page 3, line 8 of your direct testimony, I'll wait a second for you to get there.
Okay.
You mentioned a bill insert that was first inserted into bills issued beginning August 3rd, 2018 for one full bill cycle. Is that correct? Do you know how many AMI electric meters have been deployed prior to this notice being inserted into customers' bills?
I do not know that number.
Do you have Mr. Bauer's testimony in front of you up there by chance?
If it's in the exhibit book, yes.
It is not in the exhibit book.
So Mr. Bauer testified that approximately 250,000 was the number. Would you agree with that?
I do not. I'm not able to verify that.
Mr. Cook, we do have the ability to pull up the testimony. If you identify it for the record, our technology desk can pull it up for you.
Okay, could you please pull up Mr. Bauer's direct testimony? I'm looking at page 6, line 16. Ms. Lady Van Gundy, could you read the first sentence, which starts on line 16?
As of August 17th, 2018, IPL had installed 251,162 electric AMI meters.
Thank you. Let's turn to page 5 of your testimony, line 16. All right, you indicate IPL sends a letter reassuring customers who do not want a smart meter they are on the hold list. Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
It's a line 16 and 17. It begins on line 16.
IPL follows up by sending the customer a letter to reassure them that they are on the list and that IPL will not exchange their current meter at this time.
Okay, and you also indicate that an informational mailer is provided. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you attached to your testimony Schedule B, so I'll be referencing that. So with Schedule B, pages 2 to 5, and those page numbers correspond with the page numbers that were assigned when it was filed. Is that the informational mailer that you referenced in your testimony?
Yes, it is.
So on the bottom right-hand corner of the letter on Schedule B, it's page 1. It says 2/18. It's right down there, really small in the right corner. It's not showing up very well. Does that mean February 2018?
I'm not sure what you're referencing.
Do you have it in front of you? Maybe it will show up better on your paper copy.
It does not show up on my paper copy.
So the 2/18, is that Alliance internal code for February 2018?
It is.
So is that the letter that has been used since February 2018?
Yes, it is.
Is there a letter that is used prior to February 2018?
There was not, to my knowledge, anything prior to this letter. Prior to that, it was strictly phone conversations and documentation. I might add that we went back to our list and provided all of the customers that were on our list at that time this information.
So I'll turn to page 2 of Schedule B. So in the bottom left hand of that document, it says August 2018. Is that the mailer that's been used since August 2018?
I believe we have updated that several times with additional information.
The updated version, has that been made part of the record?
We have since updated it since the November hearing, so I am not sure that that has been entered.
So is there a letter that was used, or a mailer that was used prior to August 2018?
Yes, there would have been.
Okay, has that been made part of the record?
I am unsure.
What
Would have
difference?
been very similar to this information.
Off the top of your head, what differences would there be?
I am not sure that I could specify to that right offhand.
The mailer referenced in Schedule B, you send to customers who ask to be on the hold list, contains 16 pages. Is that correct? I believe the filed copy says 10, and that's the page numbers that were assigned by the IUB. But is it fair to say the actual document is 16 pages long?
The actual document, meaning the exhibit here that we are showing?
Correct.
Yes, I believe.
Is it true that only pages 13 and 15 provide any information regarding the AMI meter alternative?
It appears that that is specifically on page 13 is where it starts on the brochure? Correct.
So on pages 13 and 15, you list various terms and conditions for being eligible for the non-standard meter, is that correct?
As the proposal was originally written, yes.
Does it indicate on either page? Does it indicate charges are subject to approval by the board on both pages?
Yes, it does.
Does it also indicate the terms and conditions are also subject to the approval of the board?
Specifically, page 13 says subject to Iowa Utility Board approval. On page 15, it says the charges are subject to approval by the Iowa Utility Board.
Does it specifically state the terms and conditions are subject to the approval of the board?
It does not.
Are you aware that the Office of Consumer Advocate challenged the terms and conditions as part of this proceeding?
Yes.
Due to the omission of the board approval language, isn't it fair to think anyone reading this mailer would assume the terms and conditions are non-negotiable?
I would assume with it saying subject to board approval.
But without a specific reference to board approval for the terms and conditions, isn't it fair to think that?
I would assume some might.
Okay, I'm going to turn now to your rebuttal testimony. So you previously indicated IPL has been deploying AMI meters since October 2017. On page 2, line 15, you indicate each customer receives 2 direct mail pieces. Did you provide with your testimony copies of those direct mail pieces that were used in the various stages of deployment?
I do not believe those are a part of my exhibit.
You also indicate in your rebuttal testimony that a phone call attempt was made. Did you provide a copy of the script that was used by your employees in the various stages of the deployment with your testimony?
I have not.
You mentioned the contractor knocks at the door. I'm referencing page 2, line 19. Would the contractor also be the installer of the new meter?
Correct.
Do you have any script that was provided to the contractors that indicate they were to inform the customers of the customer's ability to seek an alternative meter in the various stages of deployment?
They do not have that script. They simply inform the customer that they are a contractor working for Alliant Energy, there to upgrade their meter, ask them if it's a convenient time and if it's okay for them to proceed. If the customer says no, then they just simply tell them thank you and they will let Alliant Energy know.
You also indicated that a door hanger is left upon completion of the work. A door hanger after the meter is replaced, does that provide customers the opportunity to seek an alternative meter?
I do not believe it has specific information on that.
Isn't it true that for a large part of the deployment, customers were told keeping the analog meter was not an option?
We did tell them that we did not have access to analog meters any longer.
Isn't it true that for a large part of the deployment, customers' ability to keep their analog meter was omitted from IPL's materials? Like the materials were silent on analog meter and whether customers could potentially have the ability to retain it?
I don't recall any information being provided on an analog meter to our customers.
All right, no further questions.
Mr. Marcus?
Yes, thank you. Hello, good morning. I just wanted to follow up on a few of Mr. Cook's questions and then get into my own. But you indicated that when the meters are fully provisioned, I think there would be no meter readers. Is that correct?
Correct.
There was a consideration, at least, that IPL presented to the board at the last hearing whereby IPL was considering reading meters for those who opt out and providing estimated bills for a 3-month period. They would only read infrequently as an alternative. Do you remember that?
I do.
Has that proposal been terminated or?
No, at that point in time, we would use other resources other than meter readers to read those meters.
Okay, so you're still considering that proposal for IPL to do the meter reads for the opt-out customers rather than the customers themselves to do the meter reads?
If that's what's decided as a result of this hearing, yes.
I see. But it still is, it's only if that's what's decided? I thought that was something you were considering as a proposal to advise the board that you agreed to that.
Correct. If that proposal is accepted, yes, we would do that.
Okay, so that is a firm offer then to either the opt-out customers or to the board that you would read the meters yourself.
That is my understanding.
Okay. If we could go back to Schedule B, Mr. Cook talked to you about, I think it was page 13 of Schedule B. This is Schedule B, I'm sorry, to Ms. Leiden Van Gundy's direct exhibit. And on the exhibit, it's exhibit page 8 of 10 and page 13 of the proposal. Let's see if this is working. Okay. It's a little hard to read. Can it be made clearer? I wanted to go, and there was some discussion about how there were the words subject to Iowa Utilities Board approval on this document. You remember that discussion with Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Okay, but you'll see that there's an asterisk, and this subject to the Utilities Board approval is the asterisk, and that relates to the $15 charge being subject to Iowa Utilities Board approval, correct?
Yes, that would appear to be correct.
Okay,
yes.
it doesn't relate to the other terms and conditions.
Does not specifically state that.
Okay,
on
so,
the page.
so there is nothing then in this brochure that says that the other terms and conditions are subject to Utility Board approval, correct?
I do not see that specifically there. Correct.
And then just a last follow-up question. You indicated that the contractor or installer who goes out and knocks on the door is advised that if somebody complains and they don't want the meter installed, that he's instructed to stop, correct?
Correct.
Are these employees or independent contractors that you're using for the installation?
These are employees of our contractor.
Okay.
Yes.
Excuse me, I have my own exhibit book of exhibits that I believe have all been agreed, stipulated to, that can come in. I would like to give them out at this time, if I could.
Is there an additional book?
Yes, I
or-
have an additional book of the
Are
exhibits.
there enough copies for the board?
I hope so. I have about 9 or 10 here.
This is the appropriate time. Have the other parties seen,
Yes.
and have you all stipulated? Our staff person will assist you.
Your Honor, on behalf of IPL, we are fine with the proposed new exhibits, with one caveat. After a conversation with Mr. Marcus, I understand that what he had attached as part of proposed Exhibit 43 was going to be removed, and I assume that's been removed from all the binders.
It has not yet, but I can direct them to do that.
Okay. So with that request,
For expediency, do you have a problem if these are handed out to us without that removed?
no objection to that. The other caveat, Your Honor, is as to proposed Exhibits 54 and 62, which are reprints from local papers, subject to appropriate use of those documents as cross-examination exhibits. We have no objection. Otherwise, we didn't see any evidentiary value to the board in them.
Mr. Clisso, I missed the first exhibit that you had the objection on. What was the number on that?
It was 54, and the second was 62.
Was there another one?
And the one in which we are asking that the superfluous materials be removed was Exhibit 43.
So when you get 43, only page 1 will be the exhibit. The others were inadvertently put in.
Can I ask a question regarding the exhibit book? So I'm looking at 43, and I only have one page.
Okay, somebody beat me to it, and I think we're good. 43 should be the response of IPL to Ms. Matera's interrogatory number 7. One page. That's all it should be.
That's correct.
Yeah. I am just clarifying for the record that all of the exhibits that were submitted at the last hearing by Mr. Marcus or the other attorney are all called intervenor exhibits. So these are intervenor exhibits 36 through 64 with objection to 43, which I believe has been addressed, and subject to appropriate admission on exhibits 54 and 62. Is that correct? If you just nod your head, that would be sufficient for me, Mr. Schuling? All right.
OCA has no objection.
Mr. Cook, thank you. So subject to admission of 54 and 62, the exhibits are admitted. You may proceed, Mr. Marcus.
Ms. Leiden Van Gundy, would you go to Exhibit 36, please? This is a online complaint submitted in the docket from an Amber Dalton in Dexter, Iowa. Do you see that?
I do.
Oh, good. And if you'll go to the sentence, looks like the second sentence, beginning, "My husband was at home." She's saying, you can read the first sentence maybe, "beginning today."
Would you like me to read that?
Yes, why
Aloud?
not?
Okay. Today, 10/29/18, while I was at work, a smart meter was installed at my home. My husband was home at the time between 1:30 and 2 and went outside to advise the installer to stop and leave the analog meter, which the installer refused.
Okay, continue if you would, please.
He told the installer that we have EMF sensitivities, and the installer tried to state that that doesn't matter when your meter isn't touching your house, thereby admitting that Alliant does not care about their customers' health concerns.
Please go ahead, continue if you would.
I do not want a smart meter and called immediately to advise Alliant to remove it. I was told by Keisha that once it was pulled, they were not able to put it back.
You can continue.
I was also told that they mailed out letters to let people know and give the option to opt out, but I am on paperless billing with them and never saw a mailer from them.
Okay. And then she goes on to say that she wants the smart meter removed. So the installer, at least as a minimum, didn't follow the instructions of IPL because he was instructed, as you said, to stop the installation if somebody complained, correct?
Objection. The witness is incompetent to answer this question.
Well, according to what she said, the person writing the complaint, she said that the installer refused to stop the installation, correct?
Mr.
Objection.
Market, just a moment. Mr. Gravedinger, your objection is sustained. Mr. Marcus, you need to restate your question so that the witness can answer a question you propose appropriately.
Okay. Is it the case that you testified that the installers are instructed to cease their installation if somebody complains?
If the customer indicates at the time of the knock on the door that they are not interested in the meter, then the contractor is instructed to not continue with the exchange.
I see. And this Amber Dalton is indicating that her husband went out when the installer was in the process of installation, correct?
That's what she indicates, yes.
So is it your testimony that this was okay for the installer to do, to refuse the installation, because the installer was not told not to install at the time of the knock on the door?
I do not have the specifics of the timing. I do know that our installers, once the meter has been exchanged, that they do not remove it again.
I see.
So once the AMI meter is installed, then we do not remove it at that time.
Okay. Is there any way that this woman is going to be able to get her meter that she had prior to the smart meter back in operation, or is it the case that she's too late?
Well, as the tariff is written right now, it would be too late for that customer to receive.
Do you
I
know?
might also add that we do not have analog meters, so we would not be able to reinstall an analog meter at this time.
Well, I mean, that last statement seems contrary to the evidence that we have. You have a lot of analog meters.
Objection, Mr. Marcus is testifying.
Isn't it the case, you've heard the testimony and seen the written documents, there are lots of analog meters either still on customers' homes or that you remove for testing and keep for 120 days, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So is your answer that it's not that you don't have analog meters, it's that you don't plan to give out analog meters?
I should clarify that we do have analog meters in service, but moving forward, we are not installing, they are not our
Okay.
meter of choice.
If customers call IPL and talk to a customer service rep and have questions about safety or health issues, is that something that your customer service representatives will talk to them about?
Yes,
And does that guidance on what to say come from you?
it comes from our documents. We have provided them information, talking points.
Okay. But that's your department that provides the
Our
documents?
corporate communications department provides that.
But you supervise the customer service reps, isn't that correct?
I do not oversee the customer service reps.
Oh, I see. It says in your direct testimony, if we could go to that, page 1, line 12, you state, are you there? I am also responsible for leading interactions with customers on AMI issues, primarily related to concerns with the AMI meters, contractor issues, or the installation process. I was hoping we could get that direct testimony up. What does it mean that you are responsible for leading interactions with customers on AMI issues?
So when a customer calls in, they would get a customer service representative from our call center, and then that information would be provided to our meter deployment team, which I oversee.
I see. So the customer will ask for information, and then you oversee the meter deployment team that'll get back to them with a response?
Correct.
Okay. And in the installation process, what are your responsibilities? You said you have responsibility in that area.
So I help to organize and schedule the installations of the meters. I also work with the contractor when we have issues and concerns with the installations.
Okay. Let's go to IPL Exhibit 215, if we could. You do you recall these documents coming in, towards the end of the hearing? Mr. Reed testified as to what they were. This first page, you can see, if you'll read maybe the first paragraph to the board, I hereby appoint, if you would read that.
I hereby appoint Sam Wismer of Advanced Compliance Solutions Incorporated to act as our agent in the preparation of an application for equipment authorization of the IDTB 004 to the FCC rules and regulations.
Okay, and this is Census's letter of authorization, correct? It says Census at the top.
Correct.
Okay. And we talked about a number of the documents here, maybe just to refresh your recollection, maybe everybody else's. If you remember, if you turn to page 13 of that document, part of the application documents is a certification exhibit and says RF exposure. And do you recall the next page? We talked about various things, including, you'll see at the, if we could make that just a little clearer, the other way. Okay. You'll
Have to identify for us where you want us to go on the page.
Yeah, if you'll see RF exposure, it says in accordance, maybe I can read it, is that okay?
I would prefer that you ask the witness.
Okay. Ms. Leiden Van Gundy, could you read that sentence under RF exposure?
In accordance with FCC requirements of human exposure to radio frequency fields, the radiating element shall be installed such that a minimum separation distance of 20 centimeters will be maintained.
Okay, and then the conclusion of this group that is submitting this to the FCC is that the device complies, could you read that conclusion?
This device complies with the MPE requirements by providing adequate separation between the device, any radiating structure, and the general population.
Okay. That is a conclusion that the agent is making. We went through that Sam Wismer of ACS, and that first was appointed the agent. Do you remember the first page, letter of authorization?
Objection.
Okay.
I don't know that the witness is competent to answer these questions. This
Okay.
would have been appropriate for Mr. Reed.
Okay. Well,
Mr. Marcus?
yeah. I would like to be able to ask this witness, I'll get to my exhibit in just a minute, and I do have some questions about it, but I would like to be able to ask Mr. Bathgate some questions about 215 and 216, which were submitted at the end of the hearing. We simply did not have any significant amount of time to rebut those, and I have my exhibits to rebut them in evidence, but they need a little bit of explanation. At the last hearing, and I can point to where that was in the testimony, but the board said that we hadn't had an opportunity to provide any witness concerning 215 and 216, and so we would be permitted an opportunity to ask questions about 215 and 216. And I think the appropriate person is probably Mr. Bathgate for much of that.
Mr. Greiveldinger?
I have no objection to Mr. Bathgate getting the questions.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Can I just go to Exhibit 52? Well, let's postpone that. I will wait till Mr. Bathgate, and maybe that'll be a shortcut. If we could go to Exhibit 41 in my new exhibits, if you have that book. So, if we scroll down a little, a little more up, thank you. Uh-oh. I'm out of juice. Do you have yours? But you'll see at the bottom that it's dated December 2001-7. So that is an earlier brochure than the August 2018 brochure that was Schedule B, correct?
Yes, it appears to be.
When is this brochure used? Is it, and here, to be more specific, is it used only if a person says, I want to opt out? Or is it a brochure sent to everybody at the outset of your communications with the customers?
So it's a brochure that is sent to all of our customers that call inquiring about the new technology.
I see. So they don't have to say they want to opt out. They just have questions, and they'll be on a list to get this brochure.
Correct.
And if they decided that they wanted to opt out, though, that would certainly be a person who would get this brochure.
Correct.
But anybody else who calls about the program would get the brochure.
Yes, if they were requesting additional information. Correct.
And is there, show me how to use it, is there a letter, a notice that precedes this brochure, or just the brochure?
Just this brochure.
Okay. So, and just, if there's a change, let's say before meters are installed, between this brochure and some other brochure, significant change that might alter the customer's rights or his obligations, is there some notification given to the customers who got this brochure saying this is out of date and we got a new brochure for you?
I do not believe we went back and made
Okay.
any changes.
Well, let me just show you one thing that I noticed that's different from the later brochures. And that is on page okay, sorry, page 13. What do I do? Thanks a lot. And you'll see under the heading I read a non-transmitting meter. And here, if you read that second sentence, you'll be required.
You will be required to submit monthly meter readings during a specific 2-day bill calculation window.
Okay. So approximately how many people do you think got this brochure, just roughly?
I would not be able to even give an estimation at this point.
Several thousand, though?
No, not that high of a number.
Okay. Okay. And you see at the bottom of that page, you'll see again, one-time initial charge, none. Monthly charge, $15 to $25. And you see there are asterisks next to those. And you can see there are asterisks in paragraph 3, correct? Next to the charges, correct?
Correct.
And then you'll see the asterisk statement at the bottom. Could you read that?
Subject to Iowa Utility Board approval, we will propose specific fees for these programs, which we are finalizing. For
Okay. I'm sorry, continue.
For natural gas for natural gas meters, only number 3 above is available due to equipment limitations.
Okay. So you see again in this brochure also, isn't it clear that the only thing subject to board approval that you are telling the customers is the charge?
It says subject to Iowa Utility Board approval. With that asterisk, it may lead some to believe that it's just that fee.
Is there anything that tells them it's not just the fee that's subject to board approval?
Not specifically.
Okay. If you could go back to Schedule A of the direct testimony of the witness. So this is the notice that went out, and it looks like from the bottom right, February, is that correct? This was going out in February, is that what that indicates?
I believe that is a reference to a form number.
Oh, okay.
I do not believe it has a date encrypted in there.
Okay. So filed with the Utilities Board on August 31, it would have gone out sometime after that, maybe in September or...
This is actually the billing insert that went out in our August timeframe with our
Okay.
August bills.
Okay, so this goes to everybody.
Correct.
Okay. So here you say in paragraph 2 that you don't have to read it, that the non-standard meter you would self-read within 4 days of the scheduled meter date. Okay. So this is different from the 2-day that was stated earlier, and now we know for all these customers that it's really an 8-day window, correct? 4 days prior to the scheduled date and 4 days after. Isn't that correct?
I believe it's a 4-day billing window that we would need to have those readings.
Okay, do you recall Mr. Wagnerson clarifying that you could send those readings in 4 days prior to the scheduled date or 4 days after the scheduled date, and that would comply with the 4-day window?
I do recall that testimony, and I would not be able to confirm that information.
Okay. Do you recall that he said that was what was intended?
I don't
Okay.
exactly remember the exact statement, but I do know there was discussion on that.
Okay. Okay, could you go to the next page of the notice? It says at the top, would you read the first sentence after the word eligibility?
The non-standard meter alternative would be available to residential electric or natural gas customers who have only one electric meter and/or one natural gas meter, and who elect the non-standard meter before a smart meter is installed.
Okay. So first, does this mean that if I am a landlord and have an apartment building where the 10, let's say, residential units are each going to have their own meter, that I don't qualify for any kind of an opt-out meter because I have I guess, more than one meter that I'm the customer of record for. Is my understanding correct?
So it's my understanding that, as stated here, for residential electric, so if it's a residential meter, just that one electric meter and or one gas meter. And it's my understanding that that's what we generally have per each account.
So if I'm a landlord, again, with 10 residential units, and I have 10 electric meters and 10 gas meters for my individual apartments, do I qualify for a non-standard meter?
If you are a customer of record, it's my understanding, yes.
That I would. Okay. So long as I'm the one customer of record and there's one meter for each residential unit, that would qualify.
That was my understanding.
And does it matter if I'm the landlord with those 10 residential units and the name under which I'm the customer of record is the ABC Corporation? Doesn't matter whether I'm an individual or a corporation, that's the landlord, does it?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. I don't see anything in the notice that tells the customer when he has to object to the standard meter. Other than, I know you have the rule that says it has to be before the meter's installed, correct?
Correct.
So is it the case that it's kind of a race to see whether after he gets this, he objects before you install the meter? Isn't that the case?
No, we still continue to notify our customers with the mailers and the phone calls and the knock at the door.
Okay. You see, if you would read, you have the right. Is mine on? Yeah. Sorry. Could you read that paragraph?
You have the right to file a written objection to this proposed non-standard meter charge with the board and to request a public hearing. You may submit comments online or contact the board by mail or email.
Okay. So again, you're telling them that you can object to the charge, not the conditions, correct?
It indicates the proposed non-standard meter charge.
Okay. And if you go to the second sentence of the last paragraph, please provide, if you'd read that.
Please provide the board with any facts that would assist it in determining the justness and reasonableness of this requested non-standard meter charge.
Would it be fair to say that these instructions that you can complain about the charge but not the other terms and conditions would have an effect in depressing the number of complaints that you would get about the smart meter program?
I don't believe so.
Why is that?
I feel if people are concerned about the installation that they will notify us.
Well, they may notify you, but this has to do with notifying the board.
I still feel that customers, if they felt strongly enough about it, they would contact the board.
Okay. In the brochure, which is Schedule B. Who does this go to? The notice that was Schedule A, you said went to everybody. Is this, again, brochure just for people who call up and ask about the AMI program? Or does-
Correct.
So, okay, so everybody doesn't get this.
Correct.
Okay, on page 3. Okay. In bold letters, could you read the bold letters?
All of the bold letters?
Just where it says smart meters are safe.
Okay. Smart meters are safe for you and your family.
And the last sentence, we've operated,
We've operated them safely for the past decade, serving our Wisconsin customers.
so who gives you the information to tell everybody flatly that the meters are safe? Who does it come from? Some, in the company, I'm sorry.
We have received that information from Census.
Okay, from Census, so that's who you're relying on.
I don't know, I didn't write that statement, so I don't know where she got the information.
Okay. Well, Census, of course, is not a health expert. They're a manufacturer that wants to sell their meters, correct?
Census is a business, correct?
And how would you know that they're operated safely over the last 10 years in Wisconsin?
We've been successful with the meters in our Wisconsin territory.
You don't know if there are hypersensitive people who've had problems, if there are slow developing health issues that people have. You can't be sure of that, correct?
I cannot be, correct.
And on page 4 of 10, if you just read that first sentence that I'm pointing to, sorry. Safety is the number one priority.
Safety is the number one priority for our customers, employees, and the communities we serve.
Okay. And then the first sentence of the next paragraph.
Smart meters are as safe as older style analog meters.
So the older style analog meters is the standard for safety, is that correct? That's what you're saying?
It is not saying that that is our standard. That is saying that they are as safe as the analog meters we've had in the past.
You understand that analog meters don't emit any RF radiation, correct?
Yes,
And smart meters do, though, isn't that correct?
yes.
Okay. And the radiation goes into your body, isn't that correct?
I'm unable to.
Objection.
Mr. Marcus,
Uh,
are you withdrawing your question?
No, I'm not. I'm asking you if you know whether or not the radiation goes into the body.
I do not know.
Do you understand that whether it goes in or not, it affects the body?
Objection.
Sustained.
You understand that there are FCC guidelines about the amount of RF radiation can be emitted, correct?
I do not know that information specifically.
Do you know that the World Health Organization and these other organizations have guidelines about radiation and the permissible levels?
I do not know the specifics on that as well.
Well, if they do have guidelines, and I'll represent to you that they do have guidelines, that's been the subject of testimony, do you know why they would have guidelines if the radiation was completely harmless?
Objection. Mr. Marcus just recognized it's been the discussion of significant testimony, and these questions would have been appropriate to ask the witnesses who testified on those topics.
Mr. Marcus, I agree that this is not the appropriate witness for some of the questions
Okay.
you're going into, and I think you know that as well. I would hope that you would move to the questions that are appropriate for this witness.
If you could go to page 7 of this brochure. If you see the last paragraph on that page, maybe you could read that, if you would. When you install home,
When you install home renewable energy systems, you'll be able to see how much energy you put into the power grid and how much you consume from Alliant Energy.
and continue.
Now, we're only able to provide the net figure from these two numbers due to the limits of traditional meters.
Okay. So this is a point to make about why solar users should appreciate the smart meters. Is that correct?
I think it's just an informational statement that we have more data available with
Okay.
this technology.
Would you go to Exhibit '64 in my book? That is a bill Alliant sent to a customer. Do you recognize that as an Alliant Energy bill?
Yes.
Okay. And do you see where there is a rectangle around what Alliant sends us and then what we send Alliant?
Yes.
That's not part of the bill. That's what the customer provided to us. But do you see that there is in this bill more than net metering? Do you see that there is a billing that indicates the amount of units of energy, 983 kilowatt hours, that is what Alliant sends us, the customer, and then there is a difference in what this is a solar situation, what the customer sends Alliant? Do you see that?
Correct.
Okay. This is November 30, 2017 billing to Warwick Kelly Enterprises LLC. Do you see that at the top?
I do.
Okay. Do you recognize this as not being a smart meter billing, but current billing to the customer?
Yes.
Okay.
It appears to be.
So it appears then from this that the statement in Schedule B is incorrect, that you can only provide, Schedule B said you could only provide the net metering. Do you remember that?
It does.
Okay. Okay, if you go to page 8 of Schedule B. Okay, and if you'll read this first paragraph at the top of the page, beginning for a fee.
For a fee, we will move the smart meter to a different location on your property. You may need to hire an electrician to do certain parts of the work, and these costs may be significant. Our field engineers will visit to inspect your property and provide an estimate based on the configuration of the site.
Okay. So you're willing to provide this service to the customers for a fee, is that correct?
Our field electrician, yes, will visit them and inspect that property.
And provide an estimate, is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And do you know what could cause the fee to be different for one customer as compared to another?
So when relocating, it kind of depends on this, everybody's scenario is going to be different,
Okay. And
where that might need to be relocated.
the distance and the difficulty would be taken into account, things of that nature?
Correct.
And this is the way you generally, is this the way you generally provide services to a customer that may be different from the ordinary services? You charge them a fee and figure out what it's going to cost.
Well, it's my understanding when we install services, we take that all into consideration. And if there is a charge for the customer, it's based on the time, the material. So that this wouldn't be any different than that.
Specific circumstances would dictate the amount of the bill.
In many instances, yes.
Okay. Can I ask you then why it would be different for customers, say, in Fairfield, where there are a lot of non-standard meters that are being requested, why their fee should be the same as the fee for somebody in an area where there are only a few non-standard meters requested? Why, if, for example, there's a $15 charge because of travel and other things for the person in Oskaloosa or wherever where there aren't many requests for opt-outs, why should it be $15 for the Fairfield group where one person can come around and read a lot of meters and determine the amount of the fee? Sorry, you can determine from that the amount of the cost. Do you know?
Well, it's my understanding when they calculated that fee, there was a lot of things that were taken into consideration. The timing that it would take a customer service representative to take that call, receive that information, enter the information into the system, manually bill that customer, as well as somebody coming out to validate those readings twice a month.
Yeah.
Or twice a year, excuse me.
Yeah, but I understand, but, the entering the meter reads into the system and things of that nature, those are going to be the same for all the opt-out people. But what's different for the opt-out person, which is a big item, as I recall, in the overall $15 charge, is the labor cost, the transportation cost.
Objection. These questions are better posed to Mr. Vogensen, and if the board would like more information on this, we are happy to bring him back to the stand.
Well, I'm sorry, but the witness seems perfectly capable of answering the questions. She's been answering, and I don't know why I don't get to ask the question of this witness.
So if you want to ask her this question and she states she's not qualified to answer the question, then do you want Mr. Vogensen to come back on the stand?
Well, I'd like to hear her answer, but
All right.
yes. Can you tell?
Overruled, and you may proceed. Restate the question, however, please.
Yeah. Can you tell us why you believe the fee should not be different for a Fairfield person as compared to somebody in a location where there aren't a lot of non-standard meters, as it relates just to the labor charge of reading the meter?
Specifically, I wouldn't be able to state that. I do know that, there's different locations. Again, the distance between each location, we don't know that every residence in Fairfield is going to choose the non-standard metering alternative, so it might not be as efficient to read those. So again, that calculation was based on what knowledge we had at the time.
Okay, thank you. If you go to page 9, the third bullet point, if you'd read that.
The customer of record must request the non-standard meter alternative.
Okay. What exactly does that mean? What does he request? Does he request your non-standard meter alternative is the Centron Itron C1S, is that correct?
Our non-standard meter alternative, yes, what we had selected.
Is there any other non-standard?
Not at
Meter?
this time.
Okay. No other non-standard meters have been installed, to your knowledge?
No.
Okay.
I mean, as a result of this, I guess I'm not sure exactly the question there. Can you clarify that?
Well, for any reason. Have you installed a non-standard meter since you began the smart meter rollout, the AMI rollout? Have you installed a non-standard meter other than the Itron C1S?
They've only been AMI meters or digital meters that have been installed since the project began.
Okay, but there are other digital meters besides the Itron C1S. The market has. You're only aware that the Centron Itron C1S has been installed.
I know that that's what we have selected for a non-standard meter alternative.
Okay. If the witness is inaccurate, could I ask counsel to correct her? We have some information, frankly, that a Landis meter was installed as a digital meter.
So, Mr. Marcus, ask her that question.
Ms. Leiden Van Gundy, do you have any knowledge that a Landis meter has been installed as a non-standard meter?
I would not be able to answer that question.
Your Honor, if there are specific questions on specific meters, Mr. Bauer was the witness who testified on that, and he could probably answer those questions.
Okay.
Mr. Marcus, if it's assistive, the board is intending on taking a 15-minute break before we go to board questions. Do you have anything further at this time, or would it be appropriate to take a 15-minute break?
I do have further things if we wanted to take a break then.
So while you're gathering yourself, I would also ask that you speak with IPL as it relates to questions that you're wishing to bring individuals back onto the stand. I would let you know that if those individuals are brought back on the stand and they are questions that were previously asked, I will be taking that into consideration if there are objections raised. All right?
Thank you.
Okay, so
Thank you.
the board will recess until 11:15. The Iowa Utilities Board is back in session. Ms. Leiden Van Gundy, you understand you are still under oath?
Yes.
Mr. Marcus?
Yes. I think I was asking you what kind of a inquiry from the customer qualifies as being request for a non-standard meter, whether, and that's how it came up. My understanding is the Centron is the meter, and we discussed Landis, but that's my question. What qualifies as getting on your hold list and requesting a non-standard meter? What does the customer have to do?
A customer can notify us by phone or through the contractor. We've had some that have left a note on their meter. All of those types of correspondence would allow us to follow up with the customer, give them that additional information. We put them on the hold list and let them know that we will notify them again once we have a non-standard metering alternative determined, to give them additional information.
Okay. In the notices that went out to customers and in the brochure, there's no mention about the cost that a customer may incur as a result of the smart meter program. Was there some conscious decision not to say anything about costs?
I'm not sure what communication you're referring to.
Well, in the notice or the brochure, Schedule A or B to your direct testimony, there's nothing that says, for example, that the smart meter program may cost you some money, even if you don't opt out. You understand there's nothing in those communications, the brochure or the notice, that says anything about the cost other than the opt-out cost.
Correct.
Okay. But you know you have I mean, these may be more appropriate for Mr. Wagnersen if you want to object at any time, but I could ask a few questions and see. You know you have a rate case that you're planning to ask for some measure of cost relating to the adoption and installation of the AMI program, correct?
Yeah, and I believe Mr. Vogensen spoke to that last time, and he would be more capable to answer any questions.
Okay. Well, just have you heard then, just in terms of your knowledge, have you heard that there will be cost increases to customers as a result of the AMI program, whether they opt out or not?
Again, that would be something that Mr. Vogensen would be able to answer.
Okay. Well, have you heard that there may be cost increases?
I think there's always that assumption that there could potentially be cost increases.
Huh. You wouldn't be going for a rate hearing if you weren't going to ask for a cost increase, would you?
Correct.
So do you think that there is a defect in the notices to not tell the customers that there very well may be a rate increase as a result of the smart meter program?
I do not believe there's a defect in our communication.
Okay, but you understand that there may be a rate increase.
I understand that there is the potential for that anytime in the future,
Right.
correct?
And you probably have a pretty good track record, I would say, in IPL and going to the board and getting rate increases that you request, correct?
And again, that is not my department or my expertise.
I think I would like to talk to Mr. Wagnersen at the appropriate time about costs to customers as a result of the smart meter program.
Mr. Marcus, do you have any further questions then for this witness?
I do. Would you go to Exhibit 49, please? Oh, yes, 49. There may be some duplicate pages. The pages I'm interested in begin at page 4 of Exhibit 49. And that is an IPL response fourth supplemental response to Mr. Lippman's interrogatory 22. Okay, so if you see in subsection B of the interrogatory, we're asking how many persons in Iowa as a whole or Jefferson County, probably should have said and Jefferson County, but I said or, do you know have requested to opt out and receive an analog meter? And would you look at your answer in subsection B, read that to the board?
1,641 customers have notified IPL of their desire for non-standard meter and are on IPL's hold list.
Okay. And then you explain how many of those customers are electric and how many gas, and well, some are both electric and gas, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's an answer for Iowa as a whole, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And at the bottom of the page, read that statement that IPL is not broken.
IPL has not broken down the hold list by county.
Okay. And then there's a supplemental response November 1st. You can see that from the first page where it says date supplemented November 1st. If you go back to the first page, please. Okay, date supplemented November 1st, okay? And if we go to the second page, you'll see the supplement, not the second supplement, but the supplement on November 1st is in B, 2,781 customers. But you're going to see, and you see that's broken down, electric and gas, but I don't want to make this confusing or misleading to anyone. You're going to see later on in the fourth supplement, if you go, we're down to 1,990 customers from the 2,781, but that's just because you're using a different system. You see in the 2,781, if you go back up to that, you'll see you're adding the electric, I believe, and the gas to get the total customers when that wasn't what you did before. Okay, so
Correct.
that's
Yep.
just an error.
That appears to be,
Yeah.
yep, an error.
And November 2nd corrects it, and I understand that. So we're talking about 1,990 customers as of November 2nd. But what I want to ask about is you have that number, 2781, which really should be 1990, and then you supplement it the next day. This second supplemental response is November 2nd. You can, if you want, go back to the first page and you'll see second supplement, November 2nd. Okay, so it comes right after the first supplement was November 1st. So the next day you say, in addition, IPL has received approximately 720 certified letters, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just asking that in addition is in addition to what should be the 1990 above, correct?
No, that would be included in that number.
I see.
I think that in addition refers to the customers that have requested analog specifically.
I see. But that number you do believe is in the 1990?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so if somebody says to you, I want an analog meter, I don't like smart meters, they should go onto your hold list. They don't have to specifically request, what I'm saying, a digital non-standard meter. Your NSMA is not an analog meter, but they can tell you that they want an analog and they still get on the hold list.
Correct.
And what does it mean if you get on the hold list? Does it mean that until this board makes a ruling, you're not going to touch whatever meter they have? Is am I
Correct.
Okay. You go to Exhibit 59. You'll see at the top, says it's filed with the Iowa Utilities Board on November 29. So this was the form her complaint took. And Nadine Cohn says, I recently, well, you can read the complaint if you read the first paragraph.
I recently noticed I received an upgraded digital meter and I had wanted to keep my analog meter. I mailed a certified refusal letter November 2nd, 2018, clearly stating I only wanted an analog meter.
And next paragraph.
My meter was changed without notice or my permission. I demand my analog meter to be returned and installed on my property.
Okay, so what happens in a situation like this where she should have been on the hold list, but something happened and she wasn't?
So I researched this customer specifically, and it appears that she is on our time of use rate, which requires a digital meter, and her meter was exchanged several years ago. I can't give you the date specifically right offhand, but for that time of use billing, she would have to have a digital meter, and it was changed at that time.
Okay, so was there any attempt to notify this person that we didn't put you on the hold list despite your request for an analog?
This customer is on our hold list.
But if they got on the hold list, they shouldn't have had their analog substituted for, right?
The hold list is any customer that requests not to have the AMI meter. So we do not go into their account and specifically look at all of the information. We simply put them on the hold list, do not install an AMI meter at that property.
Okay, but you're okay installing an analog, a digital instead of her analog.
She had a digital meter before this program ever started.
Okay, she thought she had an analog, I guess, huh?
Correct. Yeah, the customer has had a digital meter for several years. When she went on the time of use rate, and again, I can provide that detailed information, but at that address, it did appear that she owned some other properties as well, but at this address noted on this document, that is what I found when I investigated it.
If you'll go to your rebuttal testimony, please. You see in the table on page 2, you were able to state the number of meters on the hold list for Fairfield and Vedic City, but in response to the interrogatory that we looked at before, you said you don't keep records, according to county, so you couldn't tell us in response to the interrogatory what was going on in Fairfield and Vedic City. Do you remember that?
Correct.
How were you able to do the hold list for the table?
We established that by the town that is listed on the customer's account. We do not have the counties specified on the customer account, so we were able to pull this information by any customer that resided in, that their premise address was Fairfield or Vedic City.
Okay, but you could have done that to answer the interrogatory too, couldn't you? Just pull it by town.
Well, again, some of those rural instances, we wouldn't be able to determine mailing addresses and service point as far as town. on rural locations to know exactly which county those are in.
So you could have had a few exceptions or qualifications to giving us the town list of Vedic City and Fairfield.
Potentially, I just don't know how accurate that would have been.
Well, what's the percentage of people who opt out?
Objection. If Mr. Marcus had a problem with the response to the data request, he could have asked it at that time.
Absolutely. Can I respond to that?
Mr. Marcus?
How can I have asked that at that time? I don't have the information to know that you have a town list and not a county list. My understanding of responding to an interrogatory is full, fair, and complete information, and if you can pull it substantially, you should do so.
Mr. Greiveldinger?
This is in Ms. Leiden Van Gundy's rebuttal testimony, which has been on file for quite some time. And we have definitely supplemented data requests otherwise. And also, as Mr. Marcus indicated before, he had his data request asked for a breakdown for the state or a county. He did not require both.
Well, you would, if you weren't responding to both, you wouldn't have told me that you don't have it by county. And that's why you're giving me the state. But that led me to believe you just don't have anything. I think rightly so.
Just a minute, Mr. Marcus. Mr. Greiveldinger, I'm going to have the witness answer the question. I believe that it is an appropriate time during the hearing for the parties to ask questions if they don't see appropriate answers from data requests. Does the witness recall the question, or do you need to have it restated?
Yeah, if you could restate it, please.
Mr. Marcus, do you want to restate it, or do you want me to have the court reporter do
If the
the
court
same?
reporter could.
So what's the percentage of people who opt out?
I mean, the answer is it's pretty low, isn't it?
It is a low percentage, yes.
So if you gave me Fairfield and Jefferson County when I asked the interrogatory and excluded some of these rural areas, there wouldn't be many meters excluded, would there?
Yeah, I don't know that. Again, I'm not too familiar with that territory.
Okay. And in preparing the table, when you say that these are the ones in Fairfield and Jefferson County that are on the hold list.
Objection misstates the testimony.
Excuse me, Fairfield, Vedic City that are on the hold list. Thank you. You're including, anybody who has complained about smart meters and said they wanted analogs, for example, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The date of this supplement was filed October 8th, correct? You can see that at the top, I think, of each page.
Mr. Marcus, can I get you to come closer to the mic, please? Thank you.
If you go further up, you'll see filed October 8th. So that's the date of this response, correct?
Yes, it appears to be.
You understand that since that date, there have been Thank you. Petitions and complaints from people asking to be on the hold list or to have analog meters, correct?
Can you restate that?
Since October 8th, you've had complaints in the docket, letters, calls, et cetera, asking to be on the hold list.
Correct.
Okay. Have you recently gotten a lot of petitions from Ms. Kelly or seen some of her filings in the docket?
I have seen some
Okay.
of those, yes.
You haven't tabulated those to see how many now should be on the hold list?
I have not personally looked at those. One of the individuals in our department indicated that she was getting a large number of those. A lot of them were duplicates to customers that were already on the list.
Okay. Do you know what a lot means percentage-wise?
I would say a high percentage. She did not tell me the exact number.
Did she tell you a high percentage?
Yes.
And do you know what she meant by a high percentage?
Well, last weekend, she was off for several days, I believe, in a 5-day period. She had 40-some additional ones. Only 2 were new.
Okay. Apart from those 40, do you know how many have been submitted?
I do not. We have not talked specifics. I mean, I could look that up to see what's current as of today, but I don't have that information right.
Mr. Marcus, can I ask you to state to the board what issue you're trying to have this witness address at this point?
Yeah.
Because if you're wanting to know whether or not there have been a high number of complaints that have been filed as it relates to smart meters, I think the Iowa Utilities Board can provide you with the number that we've received. What additional are you trying to get from this line of questioning?
Well, besides what you have received, what IPL has received, they may not be the same.
I don't disagree. She stated there's a high number. She stated it a couple times. What additional information are you trying to obtain?
That's the information.
All right. You may proceed.
Yes. Do you know whether at any time the meters that are out there, let's say in Iowa, were programmed to radiate only once a week? Do you know at what times that may have occurred?
I do not know.
Okay. Do you know how you get a meter to be programmed, or let me restate that. Do you know how a meter would emit transmissions only one time a week if it wasn't programmed to do so?
I do not have knowledge of that.
Okay. Do you have any knowledge of meters being turned off or programmed to emit only once a week in Dubuque?
I do not.
Okay. You remember the discussions with Mr. Bauer about a large number of transmissions of meters, several thousand per week, and Mr. Bauer indicated that IPL hadn't done a good job in informing those customers that their meters were radiating more than the 6 times a day that's on the website. Do you recall that?
I'm not sure that I recall that specific
Okay.
conversation.
Have you been in touch yourself with any customers whose meters were radiating or emitting transmissions, many thousands of times a week?
I have not, no, personally.
Do you know anyone who has?
I do not know if anyone has. No, I do
If
not.
somebody was going to communicate with those customers, would it be your office your responsibility?
Not necessarily. I mean, it might be a local operations employee or a billing rep. I don't know.
But you indicated that your responsibility, when we went over your duties, had to do with interactions with customers regarding AMI meters, correct?
The installation of the meters, correct.
I see. And not the operation of the meter. Is that correct?
That deployment lead, yep. So just for the deployment of the meters.
Okay. I don't have any further questions.
Board Member Wagner?
Yes, thank you. Following up with the question from the lines of Mr. Marcus, I think you said that you have not cross-referenced or looked at the information, specific customer information of those that are on the.
Just a minute, Board Member Wagner. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Go ahead. Wagner?
Okay, thank you. I was in the process of asking about I believe if I remember your answer to Mr. Marcus' question, that you have not cross-referenced or looked at any of the specific customer information for those who are on the hold list. Is that correct?
I have reviewed most of that information.
Okay, but with respect to, have you reviewed what type of meter that they currently have?
You're right, exactly. Okay, in clarification of that, we do not look at what they currently have.
Okay.
Again, or what requirements are needed. So everybody goes on that delay list. So again, once we have a ruling, then we can follow up with those customers that expressed concern.
So you don't know or have an idea of how many on that hold list may already have a digital meter?
I do not know that information.
Is IPL looking at, such as Ms. Cohen, as the example from Ms. Cohen that Mr. Marcus brought up, does IPL monitor the board's filings or the complaints that we get in this filing and research those situations?
Yes.
And are there others that are similar to Ms. Cohen?
I think there were several in that, yes.
Okay. Do you know how many?
I do not.
Okay. When do you anticipate that IPL will quit doing manual meter reads with this program?
We are starting that process now. So in our first area of provisioning, we have fully commissioned over 40,000 meters, and so those are not being manually read currently.
Right, and so what is the date at which IPL will no longer have any meter readers doing manual reads?
It would be, I would say, the fall timeframe of 2019.
Okay. Do you know about how many meters remain for replacement of AMI?
So I believe the project is approximately 65% complete. So I believe we've exchanged over 450,000 meters at this point,
Okay.
approximately.
And then currently, I believe, based on the Matera hearing exhibit 49 that we went through, there was around 1,990 customers currently on the hold list. Is that correct?
Correct.
And how many meter readers would be required to read that number of meters?
So that 1990 represents customers. So it would depend on if they had the gas and or electric meter, both. So it could potentially be a higher number of meters. Again, our average meter reader reads 500 meters a day. So, you know, depending on the amount of meters, we could potentially base it on that.
Okay. And has IPL installed any meters as an NSMA?
We have
Option.
not. So those customers remain on the delay list. We have not exchanged their meter at this time,
Okay.
again, based on the results of this.
And if the board were to, never mind, that question doesn't exist because of that answer. I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Sure.
Board Member Lozier.
Thank you. When was the first time that IPL provided notice to customers of the AMI program?
I would say approximately August of 2017.
And how was that done?
That would be our customer notification to the customers that were first starting with deployment in October of 2017.
Well, was it a billing insert?
It would have been a mailer, a postcard sent to the customer.
Okay. And then the mailer that you talked about earlier, or the mailing insert, that was in August of 2018, is that correct?
Correct.
And between the initial postcard and the billing insert in August of 2018, what other notice was given to customers?
So customers receive 2 different mail notifications prior to the automated phone call. So they actually have 3 communications established before the contractor attempts to exchange that meter by knocking on their door.
And what was the form of the mailing notice? A postcard, you said?
The first one is a postcard that is sent 30 days prior to the scheduled exchange. The second one is a brochure that has a little bit more detailed information, and that's sent out 15 days prior to the scheduled exchange date. And then the Friday before the scheduled install date, they get the automated phone call.
And then they get the knock on the door.
Correct.
Board Member Lozier, I need you to speak directly into your mic.
Yes. Thank you for the reminder. There was discussion earlier about the complaint from Amber Dalton. Do you recall that?
I do.
Were you aware of that complaint prior to today?
I did. I've read through so many of them. I don't know if I read that one specifically. I couldn't even tell you if I followed up to investigate it.
So would Ms. Dalton be able to get an alternative meter now?
So at this point in time, once the AMI meter is exchanged, we have not gone back out and exchanged them. We've asked customers to remain on the hold list until we know what the ruling is going to be. At that time, we don't know what the requirements are going to be and what stipulations are going to be associated with it. So not knowing if they're willing to read their own meter, if they're willing to pay the additional fees that might be associated with, we do not go back out and exchange that meter.
Is Ms. Dalton on the hold list?
I would have to verify that, but I assume so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Nothing further.
Sure.
Ms. Sladen Van Gundy, I am going to have the IT desk put a document up that was filed in as of May 31st, 2018 in C file 2018-0007, and it's related to Board Member Lozier's questions. Can you pull it down just a little bit, Teresa, so she can see the date? When Board Member Lozier was asking you about the information that was provided to customers, you stated that there was a brochure that went out 15 days prior to the scheduled exchange date. Is that listed on this?
It is. It would be the second bullet point that says send a second mailing describing what to expect with the installation approximately 15 days in advance of the installation.
So you also stated that there were 3. So what's you said there were 3 mailings or
Contacts.
3. So is the third contact the phone call?
Correct.
And since May 31st, 2018 to the current date, has any of that information been updated or changed?
So the only additional thing that we have done in communication is the automated or the bill insert in August. So that went out to all customers. And then we did have a Fairfield open house that was provided a little bit more information to the concerned citizens in that area. But other than that, this process has remained the same.
Have you updated any of those brochures and documents? I thought I heard you say in earlier testimony that those brochures and documents had been updated.
So the brochure and document that has been updated would primarily be the mega mailer that we call it, that is sent out to customers that are asking and inquiring for more information. The only change that I believe that we've made to these is that bilingual. We added some additional to that for other customer conveniences.
And would the mega mailer be in addition to these 3 contacts?
For customers that have called to inquire, correct.
And has that mega mailer been shared with customer service?
Yes.
And do you happen to know when it was shared with customer service?
I don't have a date on that. It would have been when it was created. I believe the first one looked like the document was dated December of 2017 that Mr. Marcus displayed earlier.
And could you tell me why IPL created the hold list?
To address those customers that were seeking an alternative. So we started a list of those customers so that we would be able to contact them once we had determined a non-standard metering alternative.
And for clarification purposes then, the 3 notices are the ones that would have been received by all customers prior to installation, and those notices would be the ones where they would have the opportunity then to contact IPL and be placed on the hold list.
Correct.
Are you aware of any quality checks that may have been conducted by IPL to ensure that all customers received all of this information?
We have sent out notification and indicated on the postcards that if your account information needs updated, to please provide that information. Our automated phone call goes to the phone call on their account record. So if that is not current, they would not get that information or that automated phone call. So we did indicate that on the second mailing to make sure they updated that information if it was not current.
And what's the process for call failures?
We do not know what those are, the call failures.
What's the process for determining whether or not, what process would you use for a quality check?
So we don't have any follow-up after the phone call. As far as that goes, that occurs the Friday before the installation takes place that next week. So we wouldn't have time to do the quality check. So I guess our quality check was just the fact that the installer knocks at the door to make sure it's convenient and okay with the customer.
Do you know how many customer complaints IPL has received stating that the customer did not receive notice of the installation of the AMI meter?
I do not know that number.
Do you know how many customer complaints have been received by IPL where they did not know that there was a hold list?
I do not know that number.
Is IPL keeping track of the complaints that are coming in as you provide notice in new rollout communities?
So can you be more specific with that? Sorry.
It's my understanding that you provided the Iowa Utilities Board with a list that set out the dates that the rollout of AMI meters would occur in certain communities across the state within IPL's service area. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did IPL provide an update of those rollout dates as changes were made?
Yes.
Was the update provided at the September Iowa Utilities Board meeting?
I do not know that.
Do you know when customer service was provided with an update to the rollout dates?
As those are provided, and as our contractor provides us with that information, we then communicate that to our customer service department.
Has IPL noticed the location of complaints as the rollout moves across the state?
So we have seen complaints that come across or more inquiries as they receive the documentation, correct?
And is IPL tracking the number of complaints that are coming in the new rollout communities?
We have every customer that's complained on a spreadsheet with the date the complaint was received, so we could provide that information. We could get that information. We do not keep it separately, no.
And just for my assurance that I have this in the record already, the data request, do we have the data request that shows how many customers are on the hold list?
Yes, I believe that was provided in this.
Does customer service, does the Iowa Utilities Board customer service have a copy of those customers who are on the hold list?
I do not know that.
Does the Iowa Utilities Board have a copy of that list?
I do not know that.
Has IPL received complaints from customers who said they were on the hold list and still had their meters removed?
We have had a couple instances of that occurring.
And is there a list of those individuals?
So the individuals that we were notified previously of and their meters were exchanged in error, we have gone back and changed those because it was an error from on the Alliant Energy or on our contractor end. So we have gone back and exchanged those. I do have the list specified. I believe a number is under 100 customers that notified us after they had the AMI meter installed.
Do you believe that all customers should be treated fairly or equitably as it's related to the ability to opt out of the AMI meters?
Yes.
Do you believe that it is fair or equitable if they've already had it replaced and did not know that it was an option?
We feel that the notification that they have received previously would have led them to call us ahead of that time.
So I heard you state that for those that were on the hold list that had had their meters removed, that you did go back and replace it with an analog meter. Did I hear that correctly?
It would be a digital meter.
So you replace. So if it was taken out, excuse me, I apologize. Continue.
So if the meter, if their current meter was exchanged in error by Alliant and or the contractor that did not get the communication that the customer was on our hold list, then we do go back and exchange the meter and replace it with a digital meter.
Even if the customer had requested that they be allowed to keep the analog meter.
Correct.
Does what do you call the person that's knocking at the door to install the meter? What's your terminology for that?
Installer.
Okay, so
Technician.
does the installer that's knocking at a customer's door have authority to negotiate with customers?
No.
If the customer says, I don't want it, what are they supposed to do?
They're supposed to say, thank you, have a good day.
What are you going to do if you find out that that isn't what occurred?
Then we follow up with the contractor, with the leadership of that organization. We are able to document or to determine what installer was at each location, so we can follow up appropriately and find out. So if there was some correspondence that he provided inaccurately, he or she provided inaccurately, we will follow up appropriately.
Is the installer responsible for putting the door hanger on the door?
Yes, they are.
Do you believe that all customers were provided with the same amount of notification as it related to opt-out or hold list options?
The customers that inquired for more received additional information, but from a general customer perspective, yes, everybody received the same communication.
But unless they knew to request additional information, they wouldn't have received it.
The information provided on the postcards led them to our website or to call. So if some of them would have viewed the website, they would have received additional information and we wouldn't have necessarily known that.
But if you have individuals that aren't wanting to use the website and are wanting to have everything mailed to them so they wouldn't have that access, would they have received the same information?
They would not have received the additional brochure with the mega mailer brochure with the additional information.
I believe that Board Member Lozier may have addressed this, so it may be a repeat, but the board has noticed that in addition to complaints related to the the meters being installed, we are now receiving complaints in this same docket as it relates to the process being followed for the installation of the dockets or of the meters. If the complaint went into a separate file or docket, we would be asking IPL to respond to each individual complaint. We've not done that in the complaints that are going directly into this docket. How do you believe that the customer should be responded to on those filings?
So if we are provided with that information, we would follow up with each customer directly.
So on all the complaints that are in the SPU docket, you would have some kind of communication with them that could be shared with the Iowa Utilities Board?
Well, depending on the circumstances or what that complaint involved. So if those customers are requesting to be on the non-standard metering alternative and we determine that they already are, I don't know if there's certain circumstances or if there is specifics, as this customer that had the digital meter installed and thought they had requested an analog meter, we would investigate each one of those in detail and follow up.
So for Intervenor Exhibit 36 and Intervenor Exhibit 59, for both of those, customer service could simply request that IPL provide us with the information, and that can be uploaded into the file. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm now going to move to your direct testimony, Exhibit A, page 4. Actually, I think it's Schedule B. I believe I gave you my front page of Schedule B, so I don't.
I gave it back.
So in Schedule B, page 4. You were asked about privacy of information, and this page was reviewed. When you talk about privacy of information, would this paragraph imply to you that this information is not given to anyone else?
Are you reading the top section there?
Correct.
Yes, this indicates that we never sell customer data.
But isn't it true that you're giving the customer data away?
And I do not have knowledge of that.
Who prepared this brochure?
Our corporate communications.
But it's
group.
part of your exhibit, right?
Correct.
My last series of questions have to do with Schedule B, page 9. Customer of record, can you describe for me who that is in a landlord-tenant relationship?
The customer of record is the customer that we have listed on their utility account that's responsible for paying the bill.
And if the landlord receives the bill, would the tenant be considered the customer of record?
If the landlord's name, if the landlord is the one legally responsible for the bill and receives the bill, then they would be the customer of record.
And if the landlord requests that all the meters be changed, can the customer of record do anything about that?
The landlord would have to be the customer of record in order for us to comply with that as it's written.
And one last question, and it has to do with exhibit interveners, exhibit 59. When was the digital meter installed?
When I looked up this specific account, I remember it was several years ago. I do not remember specifically. For some reason, I have 2015 in my head, but I'm not positive of that.
And does that mean that a new meter was installed replacing the old digital?
I don't know what type of meter the new digital meter replaced. I know that the digital meter was required based on the customer's request to have time of use billing.
And you stated that when you looked it up, that this individual owned other properties.
I did notice that based on the second complaint that we received associated with this. And when I checked that customer's account, I noticed that this customer is listed as the landlord of that property. So I know of one for sure. And in that instance, the customer still has a mechanical meter.
Board Member Wagner?
You can keep that up, Teresa, thanks. So I just want to clarify, this person was on the hold list, correct?
Correct.
And so they would have not, an installer would have not even gone to her property to install the meter, is that correct?
Correct.
So what you're saying is in this case, this person just went out and looked at their meter and noticed it was not an analog meter. And then, so she made the assumption that it had been replaced, is that?
That's my assumption, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yep.
But can I clarify on that?
Sure.
So did she know, I mean, could it have been replaced with a new meter? It could have been a new meter, right? I'm not, my issue isn't whether it's the analog or not. It could have been a different meter,
Yes, it could have been.
and that we don't know.
The meter that she has now on her property has been there since, I believe, like I said, 2015.
So it wasn't replaced.
It was not replaced recently, no. Sorry.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
I have one point of clarification. Is
Yeah.
a mechanical meter the same thing as an analog meter?
Analog meter.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yep.
Mr. Greiveldinger, I believe that you can now ask your questions.
Thank you. First, may I offer a glass of water?
I'm good.
Thank you. You were asked questions earlier regarding what information customers had regarding what the board was approving. Do you recall that line of questions?
Yes.
Could you turn to your exhibit schedule A? Can you identify what your exhibit schedule A is?
This is the bill insert that went out in all customer bills the month of August of 2018.
And were parties able to provide comment on this notice before it went out?
That is my understanding, yes.
Was this subject to the review of the Iowa Utilities Board?
That too is, yes, I understand that to be correct.
Would you please read the first full sentence after "Dear Customer"?
Alliant Energy is seeking the Iowa Utility Board's approval for a new optional tariff to allow residential customers to choose a non-standard meter.
Please continue to the next.
The proposed tariff includes an additional monthly charge and the provisions described in this notice. The proposed charge would be $15 a month per meter, $15 per electric meter, and $15 per gas meter.
And could you read the last paragraph on this page, starting with "after"?
After a thorough investigation, the board may approve, deny, or modify the proposal and determine when the charge would become effective. Please review your process rights on the reverse side.
Thank you. Earlier, there were also questions with regard to the mega mailer as to whether IPL was informing customers of analog meters. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Is IPL proposing to have an analog meter be a non-standard meter?
No.
Would there be reason for IPL to notify customers of an analog meter if it is not proposing it to be the non-standard meter?
I do not believe so.
If you could turn to Schedule B of your exhibit, page 1 of that schedule. Can you generally describe what this document is?
This is the cover letter that accompanies the mega mailer when customers call to request not to have an AMI meter installed.
And to whom does this go?
These would be any customer that have called and asked to be put on the delay list.
Board Member Wagner asked you questions about how many meter readers it would take to read those customers who are on the opt-out. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Can you remind us about approximately how many customers, not meters, but customers are on the opt-out?
Customers is 1,900 approximately.
And will geography inform how many individuals are needed to read the meters?
Yes, it would.
And is IPL proposing to have meter readers read non-standard metering alternative meters?
I don't know that it's specific to meter readers, but it would be an individual that would, and the proposal would be to go do the verification reads as required in the non-standard meter and alternative.
You mentioned the proposal for the verification reads. Could you turn in the exhibit binder, which should be that large white binder, to exhibit 218? It's IPL exhibit 218 for greater specificity. You had received questions regarding if an individual was on the hold list and whether they would be eligible for the NSMA. Could you please read the last provision on this document?
Under the expansion of non-standard meter alternative eligibility,
Correct.
IPL will contact any customer on the hold list as of November 6th, 2018 with an AMI meter and will offer that customer the non-standard metering alternative.
Thank you. I could have one moment. I have no further questions.
Mr. Greiveldinger, the board is attempting to determine whether or not we have all of the identified mailers in the SPU docket. Our concern is that they aren't in any of the 3 C dockets either that may be attached because of the numbers of complaints we've received, and we're unable to locate the same. So we are requesting that IPL file an exhibit that identifies all mailers, the date the mailers went out, the date the mailers were modified, and if possible, what docket they were filed in. Specifically, we're unclear as to whether or not we have the postcard or anything that was updated after September of this year. If that helps you. Do you have any questions?
One moment, please. We have no questions.
If I wasn't clear enough, any changes, we want to see each version.
Understood.
Seeing nothing further, the witness may step down. As this may be the only time on record that I have been able to have us go to lunch at noon, we will go to lunch. We will take an hour and approximately an hour and 5-minute lunch. Is there anything to come before the board before we recess? Mr. Greiveldinger.
Nothing from IPL.
Mr. Cook.
Nothing from OCA.
Mr. Marcus? Mike, please.
I did want to ask Mr. Wagnerson questions about costs that I did
So
not.
remember I said you need to talk to IPL about that. I don't know if you did earlier, but did you talk earlier?
Yes.
And what did you decide?
IPL has no objection to Mr. Vogensen talking on the questions in the line that Mr. Marcus was going to ask Ms. Leiden Van Gundy.
Do you wish to do that immediately when we return, or do you want to do it after we go through the other witnesses?
IPL would prefer to do it immediately.
All right. Do you have any problem with that, Mr.
No.
Marcus?
No,
Mr.
Your Honor.
Cook?
We have no issue.
All right. So, Mr. Wagnerson, you need to be prepared and be mic'd when we come back at 1 o'clock. The board stands at ease until 1.